Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of CAE Sports. I'm one of your hosts, obviously Spencer. With me is Chris. We're jumping into things today because we are joined by a very special guest, Jay. So for those of you who don't know Jay, if you're a Defiant fan, you should. He was actually the general manager for the first two seasons of Toronto Defiant. Obviously, Jay, before we kind of jump into things, one, just wanted you to give a quick introduction, but also two, kind of just tell people, and obviously Chris and I, sort of your path after obviously being the general manager of the Toronto Defiant for the first 2 years and sort of what your career has looked like since then and maybe your current kind of involvement in the Overwatch League scene and define if there is any.
Uh, got it. So I'm Jay. Used to be the original general manager of Toronto Defiant. I don't think they've had an actual GM,
Yeah, that's a good point,
like
actually.
an actual GM. Um, and before I was the Defiant GM, I was originally one of the ones that moved over when Splice was acquired.
Yeah.
Um, so I was the head of all North American teams, and when I was head of North American teams for Splice, we won the Halo World Championships. It's interesting too because our Halo player, one of them moved over to Call of Duty, Shotzi. He was on our Halo team, and
Yep.
we won the World Championships with him. Um, and now most of those players are on C9, and I think they won again when they were on C9 Halo. But and we also won the Smite World Championships. We won
Smite.
Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 at Evolution, the fighting game tournament that gets held every year in Las Vegas. So our North American teams at the time, we had a pretty good showing overall. That's three world championships. It was pretty well. But before that, when I had first joined Splice, is because we had been Splice Overwatch. I had moved over with them from closed beta. This is the really OG like Splice team. This is
Yeah.
Pure, Flame, those guys.
Yeah.
Steel, who's obviously now in Valorant. Flame, who used to be the GM of Outlaws,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously Pure, who's now the head of competition ops for the Overwatch League.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah,
It's so
so a
cool
lot
to
of
see how many
the
people who
OG,
like
yeah.
the OG group, right? Like where they've all gone in their careers and
Yeah.
seen different levels of success. That must be really interesting to kind of see.
Yeah. What's interesting though, at some point we had interesting coaches for Splice Overwatch. We had what's his name from who was the NYXL coach? Wizard Young.
Wizard, yeah.
Wizard Young was a coach for Splice Overwatch. And near the end, before we closed out, we were trialing a very unknown coach at the time, and it was Deepay. He was one of the coaches for Splice Overwatch at the time.
That's so
Also,
funny, and obviously he goes on
yeah,
to have the success with Gladiators, and now in the Vancouver Titans. So from
Yeah.
Splice to the other Canadian organization, what a journey for Deepay.
yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. The funny thing is, and then Graceful, who used to be on Splice Overwatch, went on to do really well in Apex Legends, and he was originally signed by the org Kongarna, which was created by, you know, Mickey,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Mickey, who was on Splice at the time also. So it was kind of funny, like how like a lot of people have stayed in seen where they've progressed to. Just a lot of them have stayed in esports, which is pretty cool to see. And then I was the GM for Defiant for 2 years. It wasn't always the greatest. Obviously, it was very unfortunate
It's one
things
way of putting
happened.
it. I was
Yeah,
gonna
so
ask.
we had our first season, which started off very well, and then it kind of spiraled down from there when we had a player that retired suddenly. We couldn't get
Yeah,
another player in time, and it's sort of just like one thing that just happened off after. It was sort of like just we couldn't really fit at the time. You're just trying to like plug the holes in the dam that's coming, but you could only do so much. And then the second season, we had a lot of hope for that season, and
yeah,
then obviously the pandemic happened. A lot of people decided to retire, including myself during the pandemic. I was
yes.
I was quarantined in Canada. um, I was away from my family,
That
um,
must be tough.
and I was very stressed out also because during this time it was sort of like nobody knew how long we would be under quarantine,
One
how
hundred
long
percent.
everything would happen. So as a business, the company itself had to downsize quite a lot just to make sure that they could maintain, the necessities of the team, which is, the core,
Yeah.
the players and the core personnel. But because of that, all the people that had to stick around and try to, maintain the fort, we would all have to do double or triple duty, and so it
Yeah.
was a lot more work. And so, you know,
Which is
the
stressful. Yeah.
stress was very high. I know at one point I was working like 70 to 90 hours a week
That's
and just
wild.
very tired all the time.
Yeah.
And just it was me in a small apartment. They're nice apartments. They're small apartments. I was sharing it with the GM of the Ultra at the time, Dom.
Oh
And
yeah, Dominique. Yeah.
yeah, so we both have players that are going through a lot of stress with the pandemic. We
Yeah.
have coaches that are stressed out by the pandemic. So Felix, he decided, he was talking to his family, he decided to retire.
No.
What he felt what was best for him and his wife was to be back home.
For
And
sure.
I don't fault him for that,
No. No. No.
because, Kellix was talking to his parents. They were very stressed out by the pandemic also. So
Yeah.
he decided to retire also. And then I decided to retire. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of retirements in a row that happened, obviously, with Defiant, and it's kind of unfortunate. I've always had a good relationship with the players,
Mm-hmm.
though, and um, so it was funny. After I retired, I went back home. I'm from New York City originally,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then I went back home. I, was just doing. I was working, and then I got I talked to an agent who I've had a lot of business with when I was an Overwatch League coach. Uh, his name is Dave, or people know him as Bench or Bench Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so Dave asked if I had been interested in being an agent, and then I was like, I had no interest in being an agent. But he
Then you
said
watched
that,
Entourage, the show, and you're like,
yeah.
yeah, you know what? Maybe I'll give it that.
So he was like, why don't you, talk to Rowan, who is the head of our esports division,
Yeah.
and just see, So I talked to him, and the reason I decided to become an agent was because number one, I decided to become an agent, but also keep a very small client list.
Mm-hmm.
I don't take new clients very rarely. I don't. So like it was one of the things I liked SEG mainly because they're not a esports agency originally.
Mm-hmm.
They're just a traditional sports agency. I think they're like the second largest football agency or
Wow.
soccer in America agency in Europe. Um, so just bear in mind, so in SEG, their esports division, I think there's less than 10 of us,
Mm-hmm.
while I think their football or their sports division is like maybe a couple hundred
Yeah.
agents. So it's a big difference between in
Well,
the
I'm sure there's
agency
also a
size.
big difference from football and the revenue that generates and
Yes,
compares, right? Like
yeah,
that's
obviously the money is
yeah,
a much bigger difference,
yeah.
but I liked SCG because they had been around for a very long time
Mm-hmm.
doing traditional sports. They had a good reputation in Europe. I liked the guy because when I had been in Overwatch League GM, you deal with many agencies, right? Because you deal with agents all the time. Most
Absolutely.
players are represented by agency. Some agencies and some agents you deal with are obviously better than others. I've always enjoyed dealing with SEG agents because they were always very straightforward. There was never a deal I made with them, and then they came back trying to change on the deal.
Yeah.
Um, so, whatever we discussed, it was always laid out very quickly. Everything was very, to the point and very transparent, and I liked their honesty about it. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that they had been around a long time, number one, and because of traditional sports,
Yeah.
they wanted to make sure that all the stuff they kept in traditional sports in terms of just professionalism carried over. And problem with esports agencies that are just esports agencies is that a lot of them just grew up out of the blue, out of
Mm-hmm.
just
It's not as
the
established, like you mentioned,
it's not
right?
as
There's
established.
Yeah, no Z
Uh,
rolls.
so
no,
a
it's
lot
great
of
to hear.
times it's like former players
Yeah.
and whatnot that just decide they want to be an agent. Um, and so I became an agent. It's and I still decided like some of the players that I had been GM with asked me if I could represent them, and I decided to because I still had a good relationship. Some of the coaches did, um, and yeah, that's about it. I mean, I
That's
also
awesome.
have a regular because I try to like since I don't want to make it so that I have too many clients as an agent. I keep a small like client pool, so I can give them as much individual attention as I can.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, that wouldn't really keep me busy fully during the regular day. So I have a
Yeah.
regular job. I work for the U.S. government, but that's I do that
I didn't even know that.
outside of
That's
so I do
awesome.
that. That's yeah. But,
That's sweet. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's great to hear obviously the success that you've had since you've left the Defiant, because I know we originally had you on the show, obviously when you were the GM, and you mentioned season 1 and season 2, right? If you're a Defiant fan, I still think you have fantasies about reliving the glory days that was season 1, stage 1, back when we went 5-2 there and made it to the playoffs and finished third place and got the unlucky draw of San Francisco Shock, who obviously went on to be the Shock, but. That really was, which is insane to think about, but you could argue the most successful that the franchise has ever been. And in regards to their pure competitiveness, right? It would maybe be then or debatably, I guess, Agility's Genji or now, right? I think those are the three peaks of Defiant, if you will. Was stage 1 this year, Agility's getting top 4 off the Genji buff, or stage 1. So in terms of, obviously, you became a talent agent, you work on the esports side of things. I guess in terms of your relationship with Defiant currently, then is that so really what it is, right? It's more so just from the player talent perspective. You represent certain individuals and that, or do you ever kind of consult or talk to people from
So I don't have a negative relationship with Defiant.
For sure.
It wasn't like I didn't leave on bad terms.
Yeah,
I just retired. It was during a pandemic. They understood.
And I'm sure the pandemic was tough on everyone.
Generally, obviously, I have also friends that still work there.
Absolutely.
I always got along with, everyone at Defiant. I never had any real issues with them. But right now, I don't represent anyone on Defiant. I know my agency, I think, does.
Yeah.
But I don't really deal with anything
for sure.
Defiant-wise. I know that I have talked to them on occasion and given them some advice if I hear stuff that happening early. Because the thing with being an agent is that you hear everything in terms of agency-wise about what moves are happening among your fellow agents. Because obviously we sit down as a division and we talk about what's happening in the ecosystem and what are you negotiating something? Are you negotiating system? And then we tell each other what the plans are from these teams and who we can fill to try to see if we can offer them. And then just obviously you have strategy sessions about that, and we talk about it internally among us as agents. And then you hear so if one agent has been talking to an org saying, hey, this team needs this and this and this. They're looking to drop these people. So we'll know about it internally and we'll discuss it because we hear stuff that's happening. On occasion, I've tried to hint at Defiant.
Yeah,
because
try to help
I
them
do
out, right?
I'm
Like, hey,
maybe, this guy might be available. You could think about
great
it. And
fit
I
too,
mean,
right?
I don't represent him. I think because I was the GM, I still have a soft spot in my heart for the Defiant.
And I'm sure a lot of people...
I want the team. I would like the team to do well.
Same.
It would. Yeah, I'm not Canadian. I'm an American. I'm a Korean American. I'm from New York City. But I don't root for NYXL, even though I'm from New York. If I have to root for a team, I generally root for Defiant because
you
have the
history with that team,
for sure.
Obviously. If I don't root for Defiant, I root for the team I have played.
Exactly, you root for your players first and foremost, right? And then assuming there's no actual, you don't have your career. Yeah, from the personal perspective, it's nice to see that you still kind of root for the team that you used to work with. So I guess one of the next questions really then being, obviously I kind of want to get, because I know that from all the people, Mobydik obviously is somebody who you would have worked with in the past, because when you originally brought on in season 1, he was a part of your coaching staff. So I do want to get, because I know a lot of fans, the whole KDG situation, obviously Logix, tweet, this is another reason I wanted to bring you on. You would have been a part of that situation and you knew Logix. I kind of just want to hear your opinion, because you used to be somebody who was more in charge of, constructing a team without any, bias or whatever. Just your overall thoughts and opinions on how this, organization was kind of constructed over the last 2 years since you sort of stepped aside. Just from your own personal opinions. I know Chris and I have obviously talked about team previews a lot, but going into this year, I know there's a lot of fans who are pretty excited about certain aspects, other question marks about some other aspects. Just kind of want to hear your thoughts and opinions, and then we can kind of get into the whole KDG Logix situation.
Yeah. So I know after I left and the years following, their big thing with OEM was not so much management, because management can be hard to find
Mm-hmm.
that actually understands the ecosystem. You know, they wanted to rely on, they'll handle all the back end stuff that the management internally would do. Like, they'll use their team manager or
Yeah.
their operations people, and Adam and them, they'll handle logistics, all that stuff, everything to do that normally would require GM. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so they might still get a GM later on. I know they've thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
They've had discussions, they've done interviews, but I think, um, their main focus was, let's get a head coach,
Yep.
um, and try to get the best head coach that we can find available. Um, I know KDG was high on their list of coaches. They had other head coaches they were interested in, but for one reason or another, you know stuff just
Yep.
happens. And then KDG was available. He interviewed. They liked the fact that he had a long history,
Mm-hmm.
relatively successful history. It
Debatably.
you Yeah, you could say that. It's I think it's wrong to say a coach is carried by
A
how
roster.
much a roster, right?
Yeah.
But he had a good roster, which he did it. But he you can also take a good roster and completely shit the bed with that roster,
Absolutely.
right?
That's a fair point.
So he clearly did pretty well. I will give him the fact that he did have a very good, like, support structure
Yep.
on his past teams. He had a very good coaching staff and all that stuff. So on paper, KDG is a great head coach, right? What And I'll talk about it kind of now. I think the reason why Logix made a tweet, right?
Yeah.
Because he was, and a lot of people would say, oh, he's just bitter about not being played. The thing with Logix is
I think
that
it's more than
he
that.
didn't mind that he didn't get played. It's
Yeah.
not so much about minding not getting played. His big issue was that, number one, they could have gotten another head coach. Logix insisted they sign KDG
Mm-hmm.
before, because Logix was originally the main only player really that stayed with the team.
Yep.
Everyone else got dropped. To be very clear,
Beast came back.
was not retained. He came back.
Yes.
There's reasons why he came back. So it was Logix was the only person that was signed on the team. Him and Baroy.
Yeah.
Now they were doing trials. They were doing lots of trials. And good thing is that at the time they didn't have a head coach yet, right?
Yeah.
So Baroy was basically handling everything. He was he was negotiating. He was talking to teams. He was also running all their trials. And so they hadn't signed a head coach yet. Now, at the time, there was other options for head coaches. Logix had always heard good things about KDG,
Yeah.
and he knew that also KDG was not an easy head coach. Like, he could be very stern and
Strict.
discipline oriented, but he felt that the team needed that. He felt that he had been on too many teams where the discipline was too lax,
Mm-hmm.
and so he wanted a team with a very clear cut, top down, where the head coach is able to lay out the structure and what's going on, and is able to put players in their place if they're and keep their egos in check if they need to, right?
Yeah.
So Logix went to bat for KDG,
Yeah.
right? So he actively fought for KDG to be on the team, and then he originally, I guess in his original discussions with KDG, thought that the team would be more mixed than
Yeah.
it ended up being, because they did sign Beast at some point, right?
Beast was the second person announced, was he not? Like,
Yeah.
I believe Logix
I'm not
was...
sure if it was the second person. He may have been. I'm not sure if he was the second signing, but he may have been the second
Announced, yeah.
but I'm not sure. It was a little while ago, but
Fair. I mean,
if you get those two, you're gonna assume that there's gonna be a lot of mixed roster stuff happening, and then you're not gonna assume that KDG is not gonna be able to run with a mixed roster, because Fusion's was a mixed roster,
Exactly.
right? So he's gonna think that KDG can work with the European player.
And and I was gonna say, not only was Fusion, sorry I'm cutting you off here, but not only was Fusion a mixed roster, they proactively played their
Yeah.
their mixed talent, right? Like I think the biggest thing that caused a lot of controversy when it first happened was the amount of time Poco played over somebody like Fury. So KDG clearly was willing to play a Western speaking player over not only just a Korean speaking player, but one of the most talented, recognizable off tanks in the league in Fury. So
Yeah.
I think that's a reasonable expectation to have.
So, and the thing is, like, he had heard from other European players that had worked with him because KDG originally coached a European team called Six Snakes. So, there's no reason to assume that KDG was gonna go very much a Korean centric roster, which is
Yeah.
what he did. And Logix, it bothered Logix, but didn't bother him at the same time because a lot of times when you have a mostly Korean roster that is Korean players that aren't used to playing with Western players, because you have Korean players that play with Western players are used to it all the time, right? But then you have Korean players that have never really played on a mixed roster, and then you try to throw them into that situation, it's going to be difficult because number one, the players have trouble communicating, so you're going to have to try to get coaching is number one, very difficult. So I think Logix's big issue was that he fought for KDG. KDG came in, Logix respected KDG, and then they benched him, which Logix understands if the doesn't work out. But his big issue, and that's why he was mad, was like, if you're gonna bench me, then develop me where you think I'm doing wrong.
For sure.
He would sit and watch scrims, never gets feedback, not told anything.
Yeah.
Everyone just speaks in Korean. Like the coaches don't talk to him. He asks for feedback from them, but don't pull him out of a scrim, but not tell him what he did wrong.
Yeah.
That's a big issue he's had. If you're gonna tell me you don't want me playing this map, I understand, but tell me what I did wrong
and how you can improve
and how I can improve.
Yeah.
But nobody did.
Yeah.
And that really upset him.
Which one is rightfully so. Like he's a competitor, and it's not just he wants to play, he wants to win, but also if you want to continue your career, you need to be playing for other people to see what you're capable of, right? Yeah. The other thing as well, and it's a good thing to bring up, is obviously I think that he clearly had the talent, at least in some of those metas, right? His tracer was still really good. But it was one of the issues of what happens when, obviously you have coaches turnover, but when you finally bring your coach on so late into the offseason process, right? Like as you mentioned, the fact that he was already brought on, then KDG comes in and signs, 6 Korean players and I guess Beast or 7 Korean players, whatever it was. No Lashel came in there as well. I could see a world in which there is that weird dichotomy where I guess KDG was kind of like, I didn't necessarily bring you in. You were already here when I got here.
Yeah, which is very true too. It's interesting because if you're gonna come in that way, and
then don't come in that. Yeah, I agree.
You're gonna come in that way, but you're told one thing, right?
Yeah.
And you're expected to work with what you have.
I agree.
But then you choose not to work with it at all and just marginalize portions of your team. It kind of sucks, and
it sucks. And
it sucked for him. I know. Like Logix respects KDG for his work ethic.
Yeah.
But he is very pissed off about how KDG went about like just not working with him.
Yeah.
And he understands KDG was busy. He's dealing with all the Korean players. But if you take another example and why, he would love to work with somebody like Moby. So when first season of Defiant, Moby came in. Moby didn't speak any English, right? Moby, at the end of scrims, coaches generally do one-on-ones or feedback with players, right? At the time, when Moby came in, he would do one-on-one with every player. He did all the Korean players, and he did all the Western players with a translator. He would just sit there for hours, giving feedback constantly, sitting through scrim VODs with the Western players, with the Yoon, who was our translator, time next to him, translating everything for them, because Moby, had that. He felt that everyone had the potential to be developed. He had no I guess he wasn't predisposed to Western or Korean players. Moby was open to everyone being useful, everyone being good if they were just given the right coaching. So I give Moby a lot of credit for that. He worked with everyone. He spoke no English at the time. His English has gotten a lot better now. He's been on, Fusion. He was with a mixed roster there.
Yep.
He's had to work on his English now. But it's just one of those things like where obviously Logix is very frustrated, because he's like, if you're gonna pull me out, but also give me like, so I think he had a big issue because the assistant coach at the time was also the translator, and then he felt that he was because so KDG's English is not great, so he needs a translator.
Is Yang
So
One the translator, or is it the other guy? Because someone was
he
before.
was a
Yang
coach, I
One
don't know.
came in. There was another person
No,
who
not
like.
Yang One, the other one.
Yeah, who like left. I forget his name, but he was
Yeah.
former Fusion University. Yeah. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So a big issue that Logix had was that he didn't feel like the translator, who was also a coach, was giving KDG all the information he's trying to tell him when they would sit down and have talks.
Mm-hmm.
Because he also felt that this coach didn't like Logix. He just because this coach told Logix different things. Like he even told him, he's like, yeah, we're gonna play nice over you in a tracer meta because we just think nice. I think he would always say we, but I think nice tracer is better than yours. And Logix is like, I know for a fact, statistically, my tracer is better than his.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't want to dunk on Nice too much, but like that was of all the like, and I don't want to beg on I don't kick guy when he's down. KDG obviously, you're right. He reached heights in the Overwatch League that very few head coaches have ever reached across any year. He finished first, right? It's incredibly impressive. Yes, the roster is very talented, but regardless, the regular season success is there. The eye for talent is what really stood out the most to me in KDG. One of the biggest knocks, bringing in somebody like Michelle, bringing in on Sanjay and Nice, especially over like Assassin or Valentine. Those are kind of major red flags, and especially when you saw Nice play as much. Like that's one of the reasons why I wish he had kind of put more time with Logix, because I think obviously Nice can play certain things that Logix can't, right? Echo, Genji, things like that. But man, when it came to the Tracer, I did not think Nice's Tracer was that good at all, especially in relation to Logix. And I guess the communication is there, then maybe it's worthwhile to play. But his Tracer was not setting the world on fire by any stretch of the imagination.
And the thing with it's not just a KDG thing. It's a coach thing. A lot of times coaches like players they've worked with in the past. It's a weird thing that they're gonna look at players that they have good history with rose tinted glasses. Even if this player is not as good as they used to be or they've fallen out, they've worked with them in the past. They feel like they've that they can bring out the best in them still. And a lot of times they sort of like are blindsided by the fact that maybe your player from the past is not the same player anymore, and you just need to start moving on.
Yeah, and that's something that, I mean, again, I think is a fair, legitimate criticism to somebody like KDG, because like that is absolutely something as a head coach I think you need to be able to put past you, right? You always need to be kind of looking for, what have you done for me lately? And as terrible as that does sound, in a league like Overwatch League and something as competitive as sports or esports, what have you done for me lately is really the important thing, unless obviously you think that you can kind of rekindle that. But when you looked at the talent of like Nice over the last year or 2 years in Korean contenders and compared it to somebody like Assassin or Valentine, I thought it was pretty clear that maybe that wasn't the best sort of way to move forward with. But also, like, again, I don't want to dunk on him too much. Like I said, he was just let go. I do hope he finds his way back, and I would like to see him bounce back. But stage 2 has not exactly gone the way of Defiant. Obviously, this isn't really on Mobydik. He's nowhere near had enough time with the roster to really start to like put his cement in, right? To really be able to kind of mold it in the way that he wanted to mold it. So I'm pretty down bad as a Defiant fan. I know a lot of the people in the Discord and on Twitter are also extremely down bad. I guess if you want to give us some hope, really what does someone like Moby bring to the table, right? One of the reasons, why did you bring him on to Toronto in the first place? And why do you think that he can be a solution for this team long-term moving forward?
Well, we brought Moby on mainly because he was, number one, he was very good strategically. He's very knowledgeable about the game.
Yeah.
I would say he's really up there when it comes to actual like knowledge and understanding the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason a lot of players across Overwatch League that have worked with Overwatch League like Mobydik is because I think there is a stigma among Korean coaches that Korean coaches are very strict.
Yeah.
and it that stigma is generally, founded to be true with a lot of coaching
Yeah.
by Korean coaches. Not just Overwatch. I'm just saying Korean
In
coaches in
general.
esports. You hear about the horror stories of LCK and Korean coaches
Yeah.
over there and League of Legends over there. But so yeah, Korean coaches historically are very, they are very high, um, like negative reinforcement, very
Mm-hmm.
little positive reinforcement. Um, and I would say Moby is a little different because he's probably the first Korean coach I've also seen that is very big on positive reinforcement and trying to maintain a good attitude at all times with his players.
Yeah.
Like just he has a good rapport, but
Mm-hmm.
he also because he understands the game very well. He's able to bring that out because he'll actually sit down with everyone and go through it. Now, where I don't know how he is now, obviously, because there's a long time gap
Exactly.
between when I worked with him on Defiant and his entire time he was on Fusion, and now he's on Defiant again.
Mm-hmm.
I would, because the thing is, you need to not, because you can be nice all the time, right? But at the same
You
time,
also need to be
as a
able.
head coach, you're basically a parent.
Yeah.
'Cause you have to be able to bring down discipline when you need to. So I hope that he's also has that edge now, which he didn't really have before. He's not good at like putting unruly players in their place. He's probably good at making them calm down. You
Yeah.
know, I would say that he was very good at that. Dennis Baroy was very good at that. They're very like they don't get angry, they don't get frustrated. They will usually talk players down very well if they're stressed out, if they're tilting. They're good at that stuff. Um, where they may not be good at is like where other like traditionally Korean head coaches are very good at instilling discipline or fear in their
Yeah.
players. And then you have like Western coaches that are good at that too.
Mm-hmm.
They'll like Packing 10 is a prime example. He can joke around with his team when he needs to, but he's also very, he'll
Was
put his foot down, and
wasn't he in the army or something like that? He used to be like
yeah,
a.
he was a Marine.
He was a pretty, yeah, so I'm
So,
sure that helps, right? In terms of
so
one instilling discipline, but also if anybody's trying to intimidate you, a former Marine, I think would be pretty high on the list.
And
so he would.
sit-ups if you get eliminated.
10 sit-ups.
So yeah, like Packing is like a Western coach that
Yeah,
I would say he was probably the best Western coach when it comes to being able to keep the team morale high and joke around with them and keep a good rapport with the team,
for sure.
while also knowing when to stop joking and get it down to business and bring players in line if he had to. Um, so I hope Moby is able to do that
Mm-hmm.
because I know strategically he's very smart. I know he works
Incredibly hard.
as incredibly hard. I know he understands the game very well. I also know he knows how to talk to the players, establish good relationships and rapport with them so that they're willing to listen to him. I just hope that he also is able to instill, discipline in
Like
them
put the foot
when he
down.
needs to,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's a little bit unfortunate because as much as I am a massive fan of Mobydik, I think that he was one of the most underrated signings of the offseason because you're right. Every time I've talked to somebody behind the scenes, I've kind of heard something similar, right? The fact that he's an extremely well-respected coach. He's one of the most knowledgeable individuals about the game. And honestly, that is such an important part to have because I've kind of felt like we haven't really had that fully in the Defiant over the last, few years since he's left, right? You look at like Feifei and them, like, again, great individuals, but I don't know if they necessarily had the understanding of somebody like a Moby or like a 9K for instance, somebody like that. So I'm happy to see that we've been able to get that, but I am a little bit worried if it's almost like too much too soon, just because KDG kind of gets let go so sudden. Is this another situation where maybe you want to bring somebody else in to maybe take more of that head coach kind of role? The other part I'm curious about Mobydik is maybe his eye for talent, because I think that's another issue with Toronto, right? It's one thing to go on your 4-3 rebuild. It is another thing to be on your 4-3 rebuild and only have one remaining player who, if you go for another rebuild, might also not be on the team in the future as well, depending on who you pick up, right? You'd hope after 4 rebuilds, you have like 2 or 3 players you've been able to kind of hit on. And it seems like that's been a major issue for Toronto, is they've taken these swings on rookies and it hasn't necessarily worked out. Now, Toronto's looked fantastic. Toronto's also a main support, so...
I would give Moby credit the fact that he is good at looking at talent
That's
and
good.
developing talent. I wouldn't say this is his roster
For
because
sure.
obviously
I
he's
agree.
taking over for KDG.
Yep.
I'm sure KDG took in his input, um, but at the end of the day, this
I
roster
also
is KDG's
I thought he
roster.
was also brought in later in the process. Like
Yes,
I don't think he
Moby
was here
was
from the
brought
very.
in. I think the team was almost done when he came
Yeah,
in.
that was my
Yeah,
understanding as well. Is that like this is not his roster?
yeah. So you
Okay.
have to. Yes.
Sorry. I'll let you finish before I
Mm.
ask a question.
Oh yeah. So I would say KDG need. It was more KDG's roster than
Yeah.
Moby's roster, but I don't think Moby is the type to ever, not deal. He's gonna work with his roster.
Oh, 100%.
Uh, I don't know if he's gonna ask to see if he can get more players. Um, I don't know where, because obviously he just took over head coach, right?
Exactly.
Or interim. He's the interim head coach or the temporary head coach. Um, so I don't know what's going on, but I will say that if he's the only coach on the team, well, he's got Yang Won, right?
Yeah, I don't know what Yang Rolin's whole because he was on
Yeah.
Vancouver and then he wasn't, and then he came back
Yeah.
in last year. And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think Toronto last year was exactly a
Yeah.
crowning achievement of excellence.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Because it's a lot of work. Being a
exactly.
coach.
I do
So,
think he needs help.
Yeah. So I don't know what their responsibilities are, like who gives feedback to who does
Mhm.
what, and what in the team. But coaches can get stretched very thin.
Yeah.
So since this is his first time being a head coach, even if it's an interim, he might just be, just stretched very thin. He might not be able to give as much as I guess good feedback to every player. I don't know. I have no
Yeah.
idea what their work week looks like. I'm not on the team. I have no idea.
No, I know. I know what
I
you
have
mean.
a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
How much of a bead? This is a little bit of switch up here. How much of a bead do you have on the like up and coming talent and not challengers,
Contenders.
contenders?
Vendors?
Like,
I
just
mean,
not-
so
Can't give away too many secrets. Obviously, I'm sure you have people who represent
don't need to give away
individuals.
any
Yeah,
secrets.
I don't want to get you in trouble here, but
yeah.
I would say teams, the best teams do look at up and coming talent a lot.
yeah.
They're very, like it's kind of funny. So their regions always look at their own regions generally. Like
Of
so,
course.
Korean coaches look almost only at Korean contenders, pretty
Mhm.
much. Korean contenders, and obviously they look at obviously because Talon is not in Korean contenders. But they still look at Talon because Talon it usually generates good rosters
Very good.
in Overwatch. And sometimes they'll look at Chinese contenders mainly because a lot of times the good Chinese teams will also get mixed rosters. They'll get a lot of good Korean players there.
Someone.
Yeah, so Korean coaches tend to look at that region a lot. I know Korean coaches on mixed rosters have looked at both, but it's a lot to look at. Number one, it's
It
a
is.
lot. You have to constantly say.
Yeah,
They'll look at European. They'll look at North America. They'll look at OCE also to try to get the talent. I know NA teams. A lot of the teams that are known for all these like surprise signings sometimes people do, they do look at the contenders regions very well. I would say, this is not a trade secret. Shock is very good at that.
Yeah.
They'll sign people that people have never heard of. They'll just come out of nowhere, like because some of these players are very like, oh, like how many casual North American fans watch some of these leagues, because
Yeah.
it's just the time schedule, right? But all of a sudden, like you have these players that get signed and they turn out to be amazing, right?
I mean, like Skewed was one of the best examples
yeah.
last year, right? Skewed
Yeah.
for the Gladiators, and I mean, Ons was somebody who kind of was like a ladder riser, right? Like no one knew who Ons was really coming, and he just heard that he was, kind of
mean,
cracked
Yeah,
down.
well, the reason why I kind of wanted to dive into that is because, I mean, look at, I think about Toronto Defiant's future and their current and the ability to get new talent. I can imagine that with, let's not deny the fact that like Overwatch has been a little struggling lately. I feel like the talent pool for new talent is might be getting a little thin, and the people
Yeah.
who are good in contenders still, I don't know. Maybe probably I don't know if they want to go to Defiant. So I'm thinking how hard
That's
is
what
it going to be for us to scout.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's a concern.
I know that has been an issue sometimes in the past where
Yeah.
they've tried to act quick and get certain players, but like so players are human. If they see a team hasn't done well
Yeah.
historically, they're hesitant. Usually, you can fix this if you get like really good a coach, like a very well known coach. If you sign like a superstar coach, you can generally fix a lot of this because that coach himself is basically
Dallas,
now the
right? If they
represent.
sign Rush and then boom, they get a bunch of people.
Yeah, because those players are gonna go to Rush.
Yeah.
Because they have good history with him. They've known him a very long time. It's sort of like a package deal. Rush is gonna bring these players with him. Um, like if
You look at like O2 Boss. I know someone tweeted me the other day. They're
Yeah.
like, "Hey, should Defiant sign O2 Boss?" And I was like, "Man, I'm sure it's not that simple." But somebody like that, right? I don't know if there's stuff behind the scenes. I'm just going off what someone tweeted at me on Twitter. But I was like, "Yeah, you know what? Like that would be great. You put O2 Boss with somebody that's knowledgeable and talented as like Mobydik from a strategic perspective." And I was like, "Yeah, all of a sudden, I think you're building
Yes.
for success."
Yeah, O2 Boss would actually be a decent. I wouldn't say a coach because he's not a. He coaches kind of, but
More of
he's
a
not
manager,
a real
right?
coach. He would make probably a decent GM
That's what I was
because
thinking.
he has a lot of connections.
Mhm.
He knows a ton of people in the Korean scene. Obviously, he like he gets fed information constantly about up and coming talent. That's
Mhm.
why he's been able to create these really successful teams. And to be fair, Moby Dick came from O2. He
Yeah, that's
was
what I'm saying.
basically leading them during one of their best seasons, and we just sort of said, "Hey, we want to sign him," and we offered O2 money, and they said, "Sure."
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's what I was saying. If you had somebody like O2 Boss paired alongside someone like Moby Dick, right, who could maybe take more of the strategic elements and have O2 Boss kind of handle more of that managerial style, I was like, oh, I actually do like that fit. The problem is we kind of get into the issue that you ran in when Stella left in season 1, and it's like, okay, visas and issues, right? Like I think
Yes.
I've been very vocal with Defiant, definitely needing another DPS player. Debatably needing another tank player. And I mean, I assume that Twilight can eventually figure out how to play Zen, but if you can't, that also might be an issue. But I think the tank and the DPS are more of the focal points right now. And I go to contenders and think, maybe you take a shot at a guy like Attack or Spectre, I think turns 18 in August. And I'm like, well, that's great. But if they can't come to North America to play, then it's useless, right? And then you're kind of like, well, who can you make a trade for? And trades in the Overwatch League, for some reason, are almost impossible to make. And it's weird to me because there's so many different roles. You think somebody would be able to figure it out,
Yeah.
but we
So-
haven't seen it since like RSK or
trade-
whoever got traded in Boston for Note.
So trades are very difficult, mainly because there's a lot of money that orgs want. I will tell you from experience, trades are super difficult because even if you're not playing this player, you want some of your return back. Like a lot of times, this is not the decision of the coaches, or this is at that point it becomes like an org decision because
Yeah.
they're like, well, how much can we get for this player? It all depends. Every org prioritizes that differently.
Yeah.
A lot of times it just helps to get the player off your books.
Well, that's what I was saying.
We're not playing this player. The buyout, let's not make it high. Let's not be difficult about it. Let's just try to be as player friendly as possible. This player wants to play. He just doesn't have a fit on our team, but he might find a fit somewhere else. So we're just going to get him, for something very small and just, at the same time, you have to remember it's still a business. So
For sure.
they don't, and obviously orgs all have different relationships with each other. There is a dynamic there. So some orgs can work very well with each other and they can give each other deals. I know. So that's very funny because when I was GM of Defiant and Mike Schwartz was GM of LA Valiant, we're good friends.
Yeah.
So when I signed Kariv,
I was gonna say Agility's in Korea.
he's like, you can have agilities for free, but you have to buy me a coffee machine, which I said fine. Put it in the contract. And so
That's so
Kariv
funny.
and Agilities was a package deal because Kariv's buyout was really just his buyout.
Yeah.
Agilities had no buyout except for a coffee machine. Because the thing is, number one, they wanted to make sure Agilities found a team.
And they're
Because
gonna stay together too.
They
right?
like they liked Agilities a lot. Those two get along very well. They're roommates
Yeah.
when they're on Valiant. They're roommates when they're on Defiant. They were genuinely friends.
Yeah.
Now the funny thing was like at the time they weren't using Agilities on Valiant. Like so he was
Yes.
sort of just like he was there. He was, he himself wanted to compete. Like he
Mhm.
wants to compete, obviously. But you have Kai, who's just amazing, right?
Yeah.
So he was KSP. No, not KSP. He was just Kai then.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's just an amazing player, right? So agility, and the meta wasn't like a meta that favors Brady.
Exactly.
It's like the Doomfist and Genji and
Those
and
are his kind of
really like high mechanical like flex DPS characters is what he's really excels at.
not
So,
the best May in the world.
Yeah. May is a little different.
More
So
decision
May,
making,
yeah,
more
May is,
positioning.
yeah. May is not so much like high mechanics,
Exactly.
but like the funny thing is, so we had a good relationship because we were able to make a decision on that very easily. I know other people had been very interested in signing Kariv,
Yeah.
and were willing to offer more money, but they gave him to us because one, we were going to take a Julies at the same time,
Yeah.
and it was a package deal, and I was giving him coffee.
He needs
so it was
coffee
kind of
machine.
like a
Nectar of
he
the
wants
gods.
a coffee machine.
I understand.
Yeah.
He
wow.
gets a coffee machine. I guess that was my head is like that makes sense to me. But you look at a team like New York. I mean, the easiest thing is Yaki was obviously rumored to Toronto in the offseason. You look at what does Toronto need, and it's everything they need aligns perfectly with everything a player like Yaki can provide. It is like the perfect fit.
Yeah.
Hisu and Yaki would be incredible together alongside of that back line. And so obviously on paper, you're like, I've seen people like, oh, just trade Finale for Yaki. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but like, why would New York do that deal?
Yeah.
But at some
Yeah, but,
point, I
like,
feel like if you're New York,
you
you've got to
have
be like,
to convince New York to do that. Though,
exactly, right? But also if you're New York, part of you has to be like, let's just be serious here. The season, they just lost to Paris. The season's debatably chalked. If you're New York, and I don't think there's any guarantee, I don't know what Yaki's contract is, but he might not be guaranteed next year as well, so Yaki can walk. Do you really want to sit there and pay Yaki the amount of money he is making? Because I'm sure it's not league minimum 50K on what is essentially a sunk season, or do you try and acquire A, money, and B, maybe some assets, and C, just a culture change? I don't know the actual trade. Maybe it's got to be somebody like Hotba and Finale or Although, right? Depending on. But is there a world in which a trade like that happens, or is there a world in which Toronto can go out there and make a move? Because I look at Toronto, I look at New York, and they're both very clearly underperforming, and they both very clearly have talent. And I'm like, there has to be something there that can work for both teams.
One, Yaki would want to have to go. He might. I mean,
For sure.
I don't think
Pick New York for a reason.
For a player of his caliber, he's probably not where he wants to be.
Yeah.
He might be frustrated. I would say, like Yaki is a very, he's a very good player. He's always been a very good player. And he just has unfortunate situations where a lot of times he is the best player on his team, constantly.
It didn't have to be this year, from
and
my understanding.
You can only carry so hard, right?
Yeah. But he wouldn't be on Defiant. I mean, he probably would be, but at the very least, like that back line's good enough to where you wouldn't sit there and be like, oh, poor Yaki has no help. If he's playing with Hisu, Twilight, and Churong.
Yeah, I mean, he would. For Defiant to make that work, they'd have to offer a replacement that New York is okay with, and money.
Definitely money. Definitely, because you're not. Let's just be serious here. They don't have the replacement. Unless in theory, I mean, honestly, okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves. I don't want to spend too much on theory crafting. The only world in which I think it maybe makes sense is if you actually included somebody like Twilight and you say, hey, maybe we'll give it like Twilight and Finale or Although for Gangnam Jin and Yaki. I don't want to make that trade. The only reason I'm saying this is because if you're New York, maybe you go, oh, actually Twilight with the leadership, the name value. Maybe you actually say, hey, I can pair Twilight with whomever, and Toronto gets the two former Florida players, and it's a change of scenery. Now, I know that's an extremely difficult trade to make because Twilight's incredibly popular, incredibly talented, but I'm just trying to say that's the only world in which I think it could make sense, unless you make the money worthwhile. Because you don't have a DPS player to replace Yaki. You just simply don't.
Yeah. Or you could look around so you have to either look at the only other team in Canada is Vancouver. I don't think they have any Korean players.
Aztec. They have Aztec.
They would have to look at the North American teams because this is how it would work. So they would want them in Canada, right? But that requires a Canadian visa. These North American players, players of North American teams that are playing out of North America are obviously on U.S. visas.
Exactly.
The U.S. teams, I mean. So they would have to play remote. So Aldo was playing remote for a while.
Yeah, he was
with
using the
team.
subliners.
So it is doable. I think a lot of it has to do with they have to look at players that are not being played. You know, something because a lot of teams do have multiple DPS on their DPS line, and they might not be using certain players. I would have to look at all the rosters and see what's available, but I'm sure, you know, Moby and them have been thinking about this. You know,
Yeah.
obviously they don't want their season to tank. You
Well,
know, it's
that's-
unfortunate for some odd reason. Every year in a row, something unfortunate has to happen. To
That's what I was saying.
Defiant.
People, I'm like, at some point, no offense, they have to stop getting the benefit of the doubt. As much as we can kind of sit here and be like, man, it's super unfortunate that A happened. It's super unfortunate that B happened. At some point,
The
they
thing
have
is,
to make
so,
it work.
It's
Yeah.
one thing to have stuff happen to you, but you need to be able to adjust.
Exactly.
And make quick decisions and fix things. You
Yeah.
can't drag your feet. If you're gonna make adjustments, you have to do it as quickly as you can
Yeah.
before it's too late. If you just wait and you just keep dragging your feet, the season's gonna be over, right?
Yeah.
It's not that super long of a season.
For sure.
You're not gonna have that much time. And the thing is, if you're gonna make changes, you have to do it quickly because you're gonna need them to practice with the team. Because synergy is hard to develop, you know, right out of the gate. Sometimes you do get instant synergy because there's a honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
But you got to get past that honeymoon phase. You got to go through difficult times with the team, and you got to
Give
develop that
bubbly
synergy.
water,
Right?
natural
So
flavors
if they are
flavor.
going to make a change, they need to do it sooner rather than later.
ASAP, I
And
completely agree.
so I give as much as they messed up that announcement, but with Adam, I give Florida credit. They do make decisions pretty quickly. Like
For sure,
they will make instant changes like as soon as they can. Like
I have no problem with that.
They've made quite a bunch of changes actually, like really quickly. So like you know, that's a good thing. A team
I
that's
agree.
able to move quickly. And a lot of times that happens if there's trust between org and the team, right?
Yeah.
And who's ever in charge of the team. And clearly, the Florida Mayhem's parent
Trust.
org,
Yeah, or whatever.
Misfits trusts Albert.
Albert, yeah.
You know, they trust, you know, his decision making. So whatever decision him and Goomba, you know, whatever Goomba decides, and then Albert, you know, says, yeah, whatever you feel like that's the right way to move, let's move that way. And then the org trusts them, right? I'm not sure what the hell goes on in Florida Mayhem. I've actually visited their facility before. I think I've visited their houses because, you know, I had to pick up Mangachu.
Oh, yeah.
in
Back when
Canada.
yeah,
'Cause
exactly.
Mangachu
Used to be on
used to
Misfits.
be-
Exactly.
Yeah. So, you know, like, and I get along with Albert. I also got along with the GM before Albert, who moved on to League of Legends and FlyQuest, but I think he's retired now. But, you know, it's obviously I don't know what internally goes on, but from outside looking in, it looks like that there is trust between the org and him, so that when decision comes up, the org is willing to move on it quickly.
Yeah.
So I don't know, because Moby is just there. You know, obviously, if he asks them to do something, it all depends on how much the org, you know, is deciding to trust him and move on stuff. So I don't know internally. It's been
It's
long
been a while
time.
since. No, it
It's
makes
been a
sense. I
while.
was just trying to
It's
figure
not-
out because
it's not like I'm gonna call Defiant and be like, "Hey, what's your plan?"
Exactly.
Like, you know.
and
so
it makes sense. It's just from my perspective. I'm like, one, Glister just got let go. I was like, I don't know if he's the answer. Clearly, things haven't worked out for one reason or another on London. Then shot. Like, if he was as talented as he was supposed to be coming into the league, I think he'd be more established than he currently is. But at the same time, I'm like, at the very least, it's a new voice in the room. Maybe something like that helps. There was obviously, it reported on our podcast as well as others that Defiant was going to bring in somebody like Decay and then chose not to. And that's my perspective. I'm like, you know, I get that he has some negative connotation with him from his past. But at the same time, if you're going to implode, at least implode with talent. You put Decay alongside Hisu, their ceiling goes through the roof. Right? Like, I would have loved to have seen that. Even if there is some toxicity, it's easy for me to say as a fan. But at the same time, I guarantee you they're not losing to London and Florida back-to-back in the way that they did with Decay, Hisu, and that backline.
I mean, to be fair, London is doing well right
No,
now.
they're doing well. But, I mean, like,
Yeah,
if
they're doing well.
that's a team that you could have had if you're Defiant. You could have literally bought that entire team and then had money left over. So I guess the final question here, I know we've been talking for a while, just in terms of, you know, maybe just the vision you'd like to see for Defiant moving forward, as from your perspective, as well as, you know, Moby and stuff like that. What is kind of like the long-term growth that you'd like to see them take, and how do you think they can turn the rest of the season around? Because again, they have that stage, I believe, in September. There's stuff coming to Toronto. At least I think the Overwatch is supposed to. And if you're Defiant and you're hosting an Overwatch League event, you want your team to qualify for the event that you're hosting. So work has to be done.
Yeah, like Ultra is a very solid team, and I know even at their homestand they didn't win, but they did well.
Fantastic.
They did well, yeah.
So
and
it
I
was
heard
an
it
incredible
was
experience.
I heard it was a great event.
Amazing
overall,
event.
and the crowd loved the Ultra. Like I heard it was a really good home crowd, So
Which is wild when you consider the players. Like, no offense, but like Kleenex is not exactly the scump of EU. He's not, right? But
you know what? For Toronto, he's what they have.
Exactly.
And
the fans loved him. That's what,
Yeah.
exactly. It was a fantastic event. So yeah, just moving forward, like, is that, what do you think Toronto's going to be able to do here? And just kind of what do you think is just the overall high level overview of what they can do?
For this season, obviously it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
But if they're going to make changes, they need to be quick on it. It's going to be so they could go the route where they actually get players that are in Korea and just say, fuck it, we're just going to deal with the ping. Because who was that one player that was playing?
Oh my God, Fielder.
And Fielder was amazing on high ping.
Yeah.
And that boy was like half asleep.
Yeah.
Playing those games.
Is there a world in which you do that, and while the visa situation is getting worked on, and the player actually makes it over, or is that too much?
There is a world that can happen. You have to rush that. You gotta.
Yeah.
So there's obviously immigration stuff. Canada's different. The U.S. obviously you could put in like when you're applying for a visa, you're trying to put in for high priority, all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying more. It's not like this stuff is free.
Nothing's free
for high priority.
Yep.
But I'm sure Canada probably has like a high priority
Something
thing
similar.
also where, you pay out of pocket more for that visa, but you get the player approved faster. So
Exactly.
I would imagine there is a world where that could happen. I mean, it's not like it hasn't happened before.
Mm-hmm.
Fielder was playing from Korea on very high ping and at terrible time zone for him. So he basically had to flip his time zone all the way to a North American one.
They won a
while he
stage.
was in Korea. Yeah, and he played amazing. So it's not that it's impossible. And that could work for this season. I think he does need another coach or someone
Definitely.
there, he's smart enough and he's a working enough person to be the head coach. And if they do make him permanent coach, they need to also give him more support staff. Just having Yang one is just not enough. Yeah, he's just going to be tired, stretched in. He's not going to be able to give the same amount of effort to
110%.
everybody if he's literally having to deal with everyone. And if you also have more coaches on the thing, it's easier. You get more time to be able to scout talent out there. Because you can't just have one person do everything. Watch all the VODs, give all the feedback, come with all the strategy,
And
give
scout
everybody
talent.
one-on-ones, and at the same time you have to scout talent.
For sure.
You got to figure all this stuff out. So I would recommend they get in. And I know they are looking, right? They have a thing up where they're
posted.
looking for So so I mean, they do need another coach, I think. And I've worked with Adam a long time. I give him credit. If he understands what you're presenting him, right? If you tell him these are the facts on paper. These players, this player, we should get this player. We need this player, and then tell him plainly, if we have these players, we will be a top
X team.
Or just tell him he will fight. Adam is very passionate. There are a lot of there's some obviously detractors. They feel like but that's in general, right? Any
Pros
ownership,
and cons, for sure. Nobody's perfect.
Anytime owners or people more on the executive side, talk a lot about the team side. Obviously, there's pros and cons because there's going to be detractors. Going to be like, oh, what do you know?
Yeah.
But to Adam's credit is that he does have a lot of passion and he does want the team. He absolutely wants the team to do well.
Yeah.
He would love the team to do as well as Ultra has done. Who Ultra did fantastic. I don't know how they're doing this year as well. I know they're doing okay.
They did well. They started really hot. They had a terrible stage 2, and then they bounced back at their homestand stage 3, and hopefully they continue.
Yeah, but the year before they were hot, right?
Yeah,
they got all the way
best
to
team in the league. They
They
were just consistently the number 2 team in the league. There was no ups and downs. It was like they had a poor stage 1. They brought an insight, and they were the second best team after that.
Yeah, only Atlanta FaZe, and they were the only team that could beat Atlanta FaZe too, right? Like, yeah. So like,
and even Atlanta FaZe at the end, you look there, man. That was a close series that they could have won champs.
Yeah, he would love Defiant to be like as good as Ultra, as good as Mad Lions in Europe, and I think Mad Lions' new Valorant team is doing well too. Like, Adam would love, because it was really OAM's first team, right? It was OAM's, made Defiant. Like, technically you could say Splice, but that's really a rebranding. It went from Splice to Mad Lions. But like from ground up, Defiant was Adam's first team, right?
Yep.
So Adam would love Defiant to do well, right? So
no, I've always said that. As much as I think that I've criticized choices, not from him specifically, but whomever, the organization, one way or the other, certain players are picked up, other players weren't. I've always said that this organization cares. They're like putting in the effort. They're willing to spend, maybe not, number 1, right? They're not the Shanghai Dragons, but at the same time, they're not, the London Spitfire. No offense. Just, they're not a bottom of the barrel budget team. They want to be successful, and they're willing to put in time and resources into that. And I've always respected that. And I think that if you're a fan, at the very least, you can be disappointed with the results that you saw this week. And I know I was, but you also have to be grateful that at the very least, you're a fan of a team that is, cares and proactively trying to improve themselves. I just hope they're able to do it.
I love Defiant fans. I've always had a good overall relationship with Defiant fans.
Defiant fans are Defiant fans. They're Toronto fans through and through, right? If you're Leafs fans, you understand what we're talking about, right? Yeah. Toronto's got their.
I've done like some. I remember when we did the signing in Toronto. I've met plenty of Defiant fans, and I've talked to them when I have time in the Discord. They're super involved with how the team is doing, and they care a lot. They want, and it's not just Toronto fans. Just can't. Because really, like, Defiant is more the Canadian team than the Titans. Let's be honest. Yeah. Like,
they had Surefour before they had Rolf, right? Like, they were runaway, and we were the first kind of team to make that transition. And no, I agree. And like I said, Toronto, they're the team that will absolutely trash you when you're losing, and then buy your jersey and watch you the next day, right? Like, that's the definition of a Toronto fan there. So, anyways, thanks so much for coming on, man. I know we've talked to you off here for about an hour. I always appreciate it. Just anything you want to say just quickly before we wrap things up here? Any final words?
No, and, I mean, I would say that, I want Toronto to do very well. As their ex-GM, I still root for them. And I also, because, I'm friends with Marky B, I want Ultra to do well. Same. I'm friends with Till over in Europe, who runs the League of Legends side, and actually runs the Europe side pretty much. Mad Lions is the team I root for when I look at LEC. I still root for OAM stuff. So, I want them to do well. I want Defiant to do well. It's got a special place in my heart.
I appreciate that.
I want the team to do better. I would love them to make it to, like, I don't think they do Hawaii anymore, but I would like them to make it. Yeah, I would love them to make it all the way. Just like have that season.
I don't think we're asking for much here. I don't think anybody expects them as like, hey man, it's top 2 or bust. Just like I just want them to be better than London and Mayhem. Is that too much to ask? Can they be better than? Can they be just like a top 6 team? Just like a 4, 5, 6. Maybe they upset a good team here and there. I don't need them to be a shock, but with the team they put together, I'd like them to be better than the Outlaws, or at the very least in that tier. But anyways, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Jay. I hope you and your clientele and SEG over there, nothing but the most success, and obviously good luck on the government, the U.S. government stuff. I think that's super cool. So, looking forward to having you on in the future. And again, guys, I'll put his socials in the link below if you want to kind of follow Jay on Twitter there. But otherwise, thanks so much for coming on, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.